Good evening. I'm Ankit, and you're watching the Daily News Simplified. And in today's DNS, that is 12th of December, we have picked up six important topics. Naturally, we'll start with the prelim centric articles, the first of which is the non convertible debentures. As the Security Exchange Board of India, that is SEBI, it has asked the share companies to issue NCDs of rupees 10,000. And the earlier or the lowest amount of NCDs which could be issued earlier, it was rupees 1 lakh. So reducing the face value of NCDs will permit more liquidity. Also, the second important topic is on the Financial Stability Board. As this board, it has come up with a crypto asset intermediaries and a report describing these intermediaries. So we'll be dealing with the Financial Security Board. Now the third article, it is on Global River Cities Alliance. As this alliance, it was introduced in the Conference of Parties 28th meeting, which is going on in Dubai currently. Now our fourth article is on the issue of reservation, because Bihar government it has introduced a legislation, and this legislation will bring about 75% of reservations in the state of Bihar. Now, in the mains related discussion, our first topic is on the revocation of Article 370. Because yesterday, Supreme Court it upheld the government step that was taken back in 2019 of revocating the Article 370, which provided the special status to erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. Whereas the final article of the day is on the issue of state finance. Because yesterday, RBI came up with an annual report describing the state finances for the financial year of 2023 and 24. So, without further ado, let us begin our discussion. But before begin this discussion, let me ask you to hit the like button as well as share this video with your fellow aspirants. Further, if you want to get notified about our each and every video, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. So with this, we start off with the first article of the day that appeared in page 21 of the Indian Express newspaper. Now this article highlights that the Security Exchange Board of India it has proposed to cut the face value of non-convertible debentures from rupees 1 lakh to rupees 10,000. Now why it wants to cut the face value of these bonds? It is because cutting the face value will further or facilitate the liquidity of these bonds, especially with the retail investors. Now let us look what are bonds. Now bond are a type of debt instrument. For example, a company issues rupees 100 bond. Hence this 100 rupees is the face value of the bond. Now naturally this is a debt instrument. So any buyer will expect a positive rate of return. So hypothetically, this bond, it provides for 5% of return annually. Hence, this is the rate of return of a particular bond. Now primarily, there are three types of bonds. The first, it is known as a convertible bond. Now every bond, it has an option that this 100 rupees face value is the principal amount, whereas this 5% is the annual rate of return. However, in case of convertible bonds, when the maturity period of these bond ends, the bondholders they have an option whether to get this principal amount back or to convert this bond into a form of equity. Now, naturally, the bond has a fixed amount of face value. However, when a bondholder converts this bond into a form of equity, so the rate of return might increase or reduce as per the value of a company's share. Hence, this is a form of attraction of these convertible bonds. So naturally, these bonds they offer somewhat lower rate of return of bonds. Now the second type of bond, it is known as non-convertible bond. And as the name suggests, these are non-convertible in nature. Hence, you cannot get the equity out of these bonds, and upon the maturity of these bonds, the principal amount is returned back to the bondholder. Now, the third type of a bond, it is known as perpetual bond. And in this type of a bond, the principal amount is never returned to the bondholder. Instead, the bondholder, he gets the coupon repayments, which are a form of rate of returns, along the entire time, which means perpetuity of the bond. Hence, these bonds, they do not return the principal amount to the bondholders. For example, you must have heard a 81 type of bonds. These are both convertible as well as perpetual in nature. Now let us understand this concept with the help of a model question. And why are we asking this particular model question? Because UPSC, it has asked question related to inflation index bond back in the year 2022. So let us deal with the model question which asks us to consider the following statements. The first statement, convertible bond, they offer higher interest rate as compared to conventional bonds. Now, as I've already told, these convertible bond, they come up with an attraction that the bondholders, they can convert these bonds into equity. Hence, these bonds, they offer somewhat lower rate of return when you compare them with other bonds. Hence, the first statement which suggests higher rate of interest is incorrect, thereby first statement itself is incorrect. Now the second statement, principal amount is never paid back to the investors of perpetual bond, which again I've highlighted is a correct statement because principal amount is never given back to the perpetual bondholders, whereas they are eligible to get coupon repayments which are a form of rate of return. Hence, second statement here is correct. Hereby, the correct answer to this question is option B. Whereas the PYQ of 2022 is concerned, here the correct option was answer A. Now let us move to the second article of the day, which appeared on page 10 of the Hindu newspaper. Now this article, it reports that the FSB, which is the Financial Stability Board, it has released a report on crypto asset intermediaries in order to enhance the cross-border cooperation and information sharing regarding these intermediaries. Now, why are we dealing with this particular topic? It is because UPSC in GS paper 2 highlights global groupings and agreements which involve or affect India's interest. Now, what is this Financial Stability Board? Now, this Financial Stability Board, it was established back in the year of 2009 and it was established in G20's meeting that year, which was held in Pittsburgh, USA. Now, this body, it promotes international financial stability through increased coordination between both national financial authorities as well as international standard setting bodies. Hence, these two types of agencies, they work towards developing a strong regulatory, supervisory and other financial sector policies. Now, what are the membership of this Financial Stability Board? Now, all the members of G20, they are also the member of this Financial Stability Board. And this Financial Stability Board, it is hosted and funded by Bank of International Settlement, which is located in Basel city of Switzerland. Now let us deal with the practice question. And why are we asking this particular practice question? Because UPSC in the year 2022 itself, it asked questions regarding rapid financing instrument as well as rapid credit facility which are introduced by International Monetary Fund. Now let us deal with the model question. With reference to Financial Stability Board, consider the following statements. The first statement, it was established in the year 2009 at G20's Pittsburgh Summit and as a successor to Financial Stability Forum, which we know from this discussion is a correct statement. Hence, statement 1 is correct. Now, the second statement, it says that the Financial Stability Board, it has launched extractive-led local economic diversification program in collaboration with United Nations Economic and Social Council. Now, this particular social council, it was introduced by World Bank and not Financial Stability Board. Hence, this second statement is incorrect. Now, the third statement, it says that the FSB, it is hosted and funded by the International Monetary Fund, which we know from our discussion is an incorrect statement because it is hosted and funded by Bank of International Settlement, which is located in Basel, Switzerland. Hence, how many of the above statement is or are correct? From this above discussion, we can conclude that only statement 1 is correct. Hence, option A was the right answer. Now, let us move to the third article of the day, which appeared in page 9 of the Indian Express. Now, 9 countries, they have come together to form a global river city alliance. And this alliance is inspired by India's River City Alliance, which was launched last year. Now, this Global River City Alliance, as I've already highlighted, is modeled on India's River City Alliance. And the Secretariat of GRCA is hosted by National Mission for Clean Ganga, which comes under Ministry of Jal Shakti, as well as National Institute for Urban Affairs, which comes under Ministry of Urban Affairs. Now, there are 9 nations who have come together to form this alliance, which are these nations. Now, what are the focus area of this alliance? This alliance, it focuses on capacity building and knowledge exchange between these countries in order to manage the rivers in a more integrated manner. Further, this body or this alliance, it aims to increase the collaboration between these countries in order to undertake water monitoring, share of best practices in which are related to urban areas and their rivers. Hence, you can say that this body, it aims to fulfill the sustainable river management. Now, let us understand this topic with the help of a model question. Now, why are we asking or why have we curated this particular model question? It is because UPSC in the year 2017, it asked a question related to Global Climate Change Alliance. Hence, let us understand this model question. Now, it is an initiative of United Nations Environment Program, which we know for sure is incorrect because this initiative was introduced by National Mission for Clean Ganga. Now, the second statement, it says that the GRCA, it focuses on capacity building, knowledge exchange in integrated river management to address climate change impacts on ecosystem. Now, this statement is correct because this particular body, it focuses on climate change and it wants to increase the capacity building of nations in order to undertake integrated river management. Now, the third statement, it says that the World Bank, it hosts the Secretariat of GRCA, which we know again is an incorrect statement because the Secretariat, it is hosted by National Mission for Clean Ganga and National Institute for Urban Affairs. Hence, only one statement is correct, thereby option A again is the correct answer. Whereas the PYQ is concerned, here also option A was the right answer. Now, let us move to the fourth prelims related article, which appeared in page 10 of the Hindu newspaper. Now, in this article, we witness that the Bihar government has approved 2 bills which wants to increase the reservation in jobs and education in the state for up to 75% of seats. And this bill, it has sparked the debate around what is the permissible limit of providing reservations in India. Now, the issue of how much reservation should be provided, it was first dealt with by the Supreme Court of India in the M.R. Balaji others versus State of Mysore case, and this was in the year of 1963. Now, in this particular case, the Supreme Court highlighted that the reservation, it should have a 50% limit, because if we want to cross this limit, it will infringe on the rights of non-reserved persons. Hence, any reservation, it should have a reasonable and legitimate reservation. And this issue again was dealt by Supreme Court in the Indira Sani judgment versus Union of India case. And this judgment, it overheard the case related to reservations for the other backward classes. And in this particular judgment, the Supreme Court, it upheld the increase of reservation of 27%, which was provided to the members of other backward classes. However, also Supreme Court, it capped the reservation up to 50%. Hence, it invalidated the extra 10% reservation which was provided to the economically weaker section. However, the government of India, it brought 103rd Amendment Act of the Indian Constitution. And this Amendment Act, it provided 10% of reservation for economically weaker section. And this particular amendment, it was upheld by the Supreme Court in the Janhit Abhiyan versus Union of India case, which was in the year of 2022. Hence, the Supreme Court, it highlights that the reservation, it can go beyond 50% in order to provide reservation for the economically weaker section. Also, there are many states in the country, for example, Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu, as well as many northeastern states who are providing more than 50% of reservation. For example, Chhattisgarh provides 72% of reservation, whereas on the other hand, Tamil Nadu, it provides 69% of reservation. Hence, you can see the limit of reservation in India, it has already exceeded that of 50%. Now, let us deal with the model question. And why are we asking this particular model question? Because UPSC in this year itself, it asks questions related to reservation under Article 16, subsection 4. Now, let us consider the following statements. The first statement, in any case, reservation for all communities, it cannot exceed the 50% benchmark. Now, we know for sure the reservation in India, it has already exceeded 50% with that of 10% of reservation for economically weaker section. Hence, this first statement is incorrect. Now, the second statement, it says that the reservations, they are provided to ensure proportionate representation. Again, this term, that is proportionate representation, is incorrect. Because as you know, even in the Mandal Commission report, it was highlighted that the percentage of other backward classes, their population is more than 50%. However, the reservation that was provided for these other backward classes were only 27%. Hence, the reservation, it wanted to ensure adequate and not proportionate representation. Hence, the second statement also is incorrect. Now, how many of the above statement is or are correct? Here, the correct answer as per the discussion is option D. Whereas the answer to this PYQ is concerned, here option C was the correct answer. Now let us move to the first mains related article of the day. And this article, it deals with the Supreme Court's verdict on revocation of Article 370. Now this particular news is all over the Indian Express as well as the Hindu newspaper. Further, the Supreme Court, it upheld the government's decision which was taken back in 2019 to revocate the Article 370, as this article, it provided special status to erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, why are we dealing with this particular news article and how is it relevant for UPSC exam? Now, GS paper to syllabus, it highlights that Indian Constitution and its significant provision are important aspect of our GS paper to syllabus. Further, relations between center and state governments, it has already and is all over the news throughout the year. For example, UPSC asked a question in the mains of the year 2020 and it asks us, how far do you think cooperation, competition and confrontation have shaped the nature of Federation of India. Hence, this topic is not just important from exams, but is also important from mains point of view. Now, let us understand, but before understanding how the Supreme Court gave the verdict, let us first take a brief overview of how this article, that was Article 370, introduced in the Constitution in the first place, and why was it removed by the or revocated by the Union government. Now, in the year of 1948, the erstwhile princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, it was attacked by tribals which was supported by the Pakistani army. Hence, the ruler of Jammu and Kashmir, who was Maharaja Hari Singh, he came to Indian government seeking help. Now, naturally, Indian government, it highlighted that as the Jammu and Kashmir, it was just a princely state and not the part of Indian Union, they were unable to do so. Hence, the erstwhile princely state, that was Jammu and Kashmir, it became the part of Indian Union through what was known as a treaty or instrument of accession. As this particular treaty or agreement, it was signed by Government of India and ruler of Kashmir. And this particular article or agreement, it made Kashmir or Jammu and Kashmir an integrated part of Indian Union. Now, naturally, to pacify the ruler, the Government of India, it introduced Article 370, which became the part of 21st, Part 21 of the Indian Constitution. Now, this particular article, it provided Jammu and Kashmir with a special status. For example, center, it can implement laws particularly only with respect to defense, foreign affairs, finance, as well as communication. Whereas all the other central laws were concerned, they can only be applied to state of Jammu and Kashmir after it received the concurrence of the state government. Also, Article 35A, it was introduced in 1950s. And this article, it gave the power to the Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly to define what were the permanent residents of the state and what are their special rights and privileges. Now, coming back to the year of 2019. And in this year, especially on August the 5th, the Union government, it enacted Constitution application to the Jammu and Kashmir Order of the year 2019. And this order, it made every provision of the Indian Constitution applicable to the Jammu and Kashmir. Further, a Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, it was also enacted in the same year. And this Reorganization Act, it divided the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir into two separate union territories. The first union territory was Union and Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, which was provided with a legislative assembly. Whereas the second union, it was Union Territory of Ladakh, which was not provided a legislative assembly. Now, how this revocation of Article 370 took place. Now, the President, it issued a particular order which was issued under Article 370 subsection 1 of the Indian Constitution. And this particular clause, it enabled the President to specify the matters or what matters of the Indian Constitution, and it became applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. However, this particular order, it was used to amend Article 367 of the Indian Constitution. Now, this particular article, it contains guidance on how certain aspects of the Indian Constitution is read or interpreted. And this particular article, it was used again to amend Article 370 subsection 3 of the Indian Constitution. As earlier, this article, that is Article 370 subsection 3, it highlighted that any change to the Jammu and Kashmir, it can only be made applicable by the President after he sought the concurrence of Constituent Assembly of the state. And this particular article, that was Article 370 367, it amended this particular article by changing this term to making or changing this or bringing legislative assembly of the state. Hence, any changes to the Article 370 or any change which was made applicable by the president, it can be introduced in the state of Jammu and Kashmir after president sought the concurrence of legislative assembly of the state and not the constituent assembly which was made earlier. Now, at that time, in the year of 2019, the assembly, that was Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir, it had been dissolved. Hence, the president, he undertook the concurrence of governor of Jammu and Kashmir and made provisions of the Indian constitution applicable on the Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory. Hence, this meant that the Article 370, it was done away with, which also meant that Article 35A, it ceased to exist. Now, naturally, this measure or this step of the union government, that was bifurcating the union territory as well as revocating the Article 370, it was challenged in the Supreme Court of India. And in this case, the judgment of this case, it was given yesterday by the Supreme Court. Now, let us discuss what were the key questions before the Supreme Court and what was its opinion in its judgment. As the judgment of Supreme Court, it upheld the revocation of Article 370. Now, the petitioners, they argued that the Jammu and Kashmir state, it had certain kind of sovereignty. Hence, it meant that the union government, it had limited powers when it came to erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. And in this regard, the Supreme Court, it held that Jammu and Kashmir, it was a part of Article 1st of the Indian Constitution. Further, it states that the Section 3 of Jammu and Kashmir Constitution, it held that the state of Jammu and Kashmir, it was an integral part of India. Now we know that as per Article 1, this provides for Union of India, which means that the Union of India is an indestructible union of destructible states. Hence, when the union government, it decided to bifurcate the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir into two separate union territories, this measure itself was okayed with by the Supreme Court of India itself. Hence, after Jammu and Kashmir, it decided to merge with Indian Union, it gave away all its sovereign powers. And hence, Union government itself, it can decide what to do with the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, petitioners, they also argued that this Article 370 was permanent in nature. Whereas on the other hand, the government of India, it highlighted that this article was rather temporary. Because the special status of the state that was given to Jammu and Kashmir, it was given in a particular historical circumstances. Because back in the year of 1948, Pakistan has committed aggression on the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Hence, in order to accede Jammu and Kashmir into India, Indian government, it offered certain temporary or transitional provisions that form the basis of special status of Jammu and Kashmir. Hence, as per the Supreme Court, this particular provision, that was Article 370, it was temporary in nature. Hence, doing away of Article 370, it was upheld by the Supreme Court of India, as this particular article, it was more of temporary in nature. Further, many of the petitioners, they also argued that the abrogation of Article 370, it was illegal in nature. And in this regard, the Supreme Court of India, again, it highlighted that the government orders, that was Order 272, as was 273, it was valid in nature. Hence, the government step to abrogate the Article 370 was itself legal in nature as per the Supreme Court of India. Further, petitioners, they also argued that the actions of union government at the time, it was taken when the state of Jammu and Kashmir, it was under president's rule. Hence, you can see from this amendment, the government, it provided that any changes to the special status of Kashmir, it can only be made after the president, he has sought concurrence of legislative assembly of the state. And the petitioners, they held that it was only the concurrence of legislative assembly and not the that of governor was required. However, Supreme Court in its judgment, it highlighted that the actions under precedent rule, it can only be invalidated if the actions are mala fide in nature. Further, advice of president or governor, it was also necessary. Hence, according to Supreme Court, actions of the union government, especially under the present rule, it was neither mala fide nor or it sought proper advice of the governor. Hence, according to Supreme Court, the actions of government, it was legal in nature. Now, what are the implications of revocation of 370 on the security, economics, politics and society of the Jammu and Kashmir? Let us look at this in the next slide. Now, let us first understand what are the security impact on the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, earlier, we know that this state, that was state of Jammu and Kashmir, has been under severe terrorist attack from the year of late 1980s. Hence, prior to 2019, we saw frequent terrorist attacks on the state of Jammu and Kashmir. However, after the changes or after the revocation of Article 370 and bifurcation of the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories, it meant that the police administration of the state, it came under the central government or under Ministry of Home Affairs. Now also, there is a significant presence of Indian armed forces in the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. And before the revocation of Article 370, it meant that the police was under the state administration, whereas the union government, it undertook the security operations with the help of Indian armed forces. And this created a coordination issues between these two security agencies. However, when Article 370 was revocated and the control of police administration, it was brought under union government, it increased the collaboration between these two security agencies. Further, what the government did was that it tried to bring down the entire supply chain of terrorism in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. It not just undertook encounters, but it also clamped down on the overground workers in the state. For example, the persons who are accused for providing logistical support to these terrorists, they were charged under Unlawful Activities Preventions Act as well as Public Safety Act. And as many as more than 1900 people were arrested under the charge of aid and abetment to the terrorism. Further, the union government, it created a multi-agency terror monitoring agency. Further, the state investigation agencies, they were also created. And what these two agencies were responsible of was to prosecute people who were responsible for supporting the terrorism activity. Further, the state administration, it also created state special investigating units in all police districts. And what these units were entrusted with was to conduct investigations on charges of UAPA and PSA acts and ensure that the persons who are accused of these crimes, they are ideally prosecuted. Hence, as a result, the security climate of the entire state, it has improved, which you can see from this particular diagram. As not just the terror related activities, it has reduced in the state, but also the attacks on civilians have also reduced drastically. Further, the security forces, they are less injured and the lesser amount of security forces was killed after the revocation of Article 370. Hence, you can understand that revocation of Article 370, it has a positive security impact on the uh, Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. With this, let us move to the political impact of the revocation of Article 370. For example, now the provisions of the Indian Constitution, they are completely applicable on the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, there is also not a provision of having separate flag for this union territory, and the tenure of Jammu and Kashmir State Assembly has been reduced from 6 to that of 5 years. Also, the most important aspect or the most important political impact was introduction of Panchayati Raj institutions in the entire state. For example, to undertake district planning, there was this body called District Planning and Developmental Boards. However, all the members of this particular board were nominated and not elected. However, on the other hand, with the introduction or revocation of Article 370, the government it created district council elections where elections were held to district development councils, and all the members of this district development council are elected. Hence, you can see the politics has reached the grassroots level of this union territory of Jammu and Kashmir, and this has created a positive political impact on the state. Further, to make the politics of the state, what was ensured that the Delimitation Commission was also established, and this commission it gave its final report in the year of 2022. And as per this report, the amount of seats to the Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir it was increased for Jammu from 37 to that of 43, whereas the seats for area of Kashmir it was increased from that of 46 to 47. Further, reservation it was also provided for members of scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, as well as it also had a provision for nomination of two Kashmiri Hindus. Hence, you can see that the revocation of Article 370 it had a positive impact on the political climate of the state. Now, with this, let us move to the social impact of the revocation of Article 370. Now, with revocation of Article 370, what was ensured that the laws of central government which related to transparency and accountability it was made applicable to the union territory of Jammu Kashmir itself. For example, union government it had brought Right to Information Act as well as Whistleblower Protection Act, and these two acts were also made applicable to Jammu and Kashmir. Further, the laws which protect the marginalized section of the society, for example, Prevention of Atrocities Act as well as Forest Rights Act, it was also made applicable to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, Union government it introduced Right to Education Act back in the year 2009. However, this act it was not applicable on the Jammu and Kashmir because the state government it had not assented to it. However, after the revocation of Article 370, this Right to Education Act it provides educational rights to the children of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, there were many central schemes such as Ayushman Bharat or PM Kisan Yojana, which was also not made applicable. However, with revocation of Article 370, we said that these central schemes now became applicable to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, government has also decided to open 2 AIMS hospital as well as other 5 government hospitals in the state, which will also increase the health care sector or the health level of the entire state. Further, the amount of scholarship which are provided to the minorities, it has also increased by 262% overall. Hence, from all this measure, you can understand that the revocation of Article 370 it also had a positive impact on the society of Jammu and Kashmir. And naturally, a stable security situation, a grassroots political environment, and a positive societal impact, it has a great impact on the economic climate of the state. And hence, With revocation of Article 370, what we saw that industries they have promised a certain level of investment in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. For example, as many as rupees 84,544 crore of worth of investment it has been promised to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and this investment will be taken in 42 industrial sectors. Further, this investment it will create more than 1 lakh jobs in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, the union government it has also introduced some kind of incentive for the Union Territory. For example, government extends about 28,400 crore worth of incentives in form of GST refund, interest subvention on loans, as well as capital incentive for working capital. Further, there were also some economic schemes that were implemented. For example, there was this National Saffron Mission, which wants to create more than 3,500 hectares of land, especially for saffron cultivation. Also, with introduction of Udan scheme, the union government it wants to construct 12 airports in the union territory. Hence, all this measure you can see are interrelated because with revocation of Article 370, what we saw that the number of terrorist related incidents or terrorist attacks it was reduced in a substantial manner through a positive and more coordinated security environment. Further, the positive political impact can be gauged by the fact that the grassroots level of democracy it has been implemented in the union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, with implementation of central government schemes such as Ayushman Bharat as well as PM Kisan Yojana, what we see that there is a positive social impact on the society of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, transparency and accountability of the government as well as protection of the marginalized section has also increased. And all of this it has resulted into a positive economic impact on the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on the revocation of Article 370. And with this, let us move to the last article of the day, which also appeared in both the Indian Express as well as the Hindu newspaper. Now, every year, RBI it comes up with a report that describes the state finances of states of the Indian Union. And also, this report was introduced by RBI in 11th of December. Now, why are we dealing with state finances? Because UPSC GS paper 3 it deals with government budgeting. Further, questions related to basics or important aspects of government budgeting have been occurring in UPSC mains exam from time to time. For example, this PYQ of the year 2021 it asks a very basic question which wants the candidates to distinguish between capital budget as well as revenue budget. Hence, let us deal with the issue of state finances. But naturally, candidates or aspirants they must be wondering why are we dealing with state finances and not the finances of the union government itself. And it is because state finances it has an important impact on the macroeconomic stability on the entire Indian economy. For example, states in India they spend 1.5 times more than that of union government. So you can see that the states of India have had a greater role to play when it comes to deciding what is India's GDP. Hence, you can see the states they have technically 1.4 times more economic impact than that of union government. Hence, this economic impact it warrants the study of state finances. Further, state governments in India they're responsible for about two-thirds of total public capital expenditure. Hence, this capital expenditure it acts as a driver of the Indian economy because Because capital expenditure, it creates capital infrastructure which drives the entire Indian economy. Hence, you can see as states are responsible for almost two-thirds of total capital spending. Hence, we also need to study what are the state finances, as a stable state finance will ensure that this capital spending by state, it will increase in longer run. Further, in terms of employment generation, Indian states, they generate almost 5 times more employment when you compare them with union government. Hence, more and more people, they are employed or continue to be employed by state government. However, the state governments, they also undertake market borrowing from the market in order to meet the demands of its fiscal deficit. For example, in the year of 2024, 2023 and 24, almost 75% of states fiscal deficit, they will be financed from these market borrowings themselves. However, when states are borrowing from market to fulfill its demand for fiscal deficit, it will mean that the less amount will be available for private sector. Hence, the more the amount of the market borrowing from the state, the less amount will be available for private sector, which will result into crowding out of investments for the private sector. Hence, what we need to understand that the state government, they should borrow less from the market itself. Further, Indian states, they have witnessed rising fiscal deficit and debt in the recent past. And this means that in coming future, the amount of interest payments that these states have to make, it will increase. And hence, if the state have to pay more towards the interest, it will mean that the states will reduce the amount of productive or capital expenditures. Hence, the state of finances or the study of state finances, it is very much important in order to understand the macroeconomic climate of the Indian economy. Now, let us understand what the current report of the RBI with respect to state finances suggests. Now, as far as the state finance report of the RBI is concerned, it studies the budget of state governments, and the correct report or the current report, it studies the actuals of the year of 2021 as well as 22, whereas it also covers the revised estimates of the year 2022 and 23. Further, this report was also formulated after understanding the budgetary estimates of the year 2023 as well as 2024. And according to this particular report, it highlights that the Indian states or their finances have improved in the recent years. For example, as you can see from this diagram, the gross fiscal deficit of Indian state, they have reduced from 4.1% of total gross state GDP to that of 2.8% in the financial year of 2022 and 23. However, as you can see from this graph, this stated gross fiscal deficit, it is about to increase to 3.1% in the budgetary estimate of the year 2023 and 24. However, this total gross fiscal deficit of 3.1% of gross state GDP, it is well below the 3.5% of fiscal deficit requirement that was given for this year by the union government. Further, the capital outlay of the states, they have also increased by 42.6% in the financial year of 2023 and 24. And this amounts to about 2.9% of Indian GDP, which also is a huge amount. Also, in terms of outstanding liabilities of the state, it has also fallen in the past few years. For example, it was 31% in the year of 2020 and 21. And this amount, it has reduced to 27.6% in the financial year of 2023 and 24. Hence, you can see the outstanding liabilities of the state governments, it has reduced substantially. Whereas in terms of tax buoyancy is concerned, this report states that due to implementation of GST, the tax buoyancy in particular, it has increased. Now, what is this tax buoyancy? For example, any nation or any state, its revenue in terms of tax collection should increase with respect to increase in its growth. And if this tax buoyancy is 1, the amount of increase in tax collection is same as that of increase of GDP. Whereas if this tax buoyancy is more than 1, it means that the amount of tax collection is more than that of increase of GDP. And in this regard, due to GST, the report suggests that there has been an increase in tax buoyancy. Further, this report, it also provides certain suggestion with respect to tax revenue as well as non-tax revenue of the states. And this suggestion will deal in the last slide of this discussion. Now let us understand what have been the existing concerns in longer term as far as state finances is concerned. Because from exams point of view, UPSC is less likely to ask the particulars of a particular yearly report. However, what is UPSC more interested in is understanding the broad trends with respect to state finances. And in this regard, let us understand what are the concerns that have plagued the state finances in the recent past. Now, the first and probably the most important concern is related to vertical imbalance. Now, as you know, the substantial part of state's revenue, it is given to it by the union government in form of tax devolution. Now, this tax devolution by the union government, it is provided to the states as per recommendations of the Finance Commission. Now, for example, the 15th Finance Commission, it highlighted that 41% of total tax proceeds, it should be given to the state government. Now, what are these tax proceeds? Now, these tax proceeds, they are total collection of tax by the union government, which is subtracted with non-distributable taxes such as cess as well as surcharge. Now, this 41%, it is deducted or it is calculated by subtracting the total tax collection to that of adding cess and surcharge. Now, in this regard, the amount of cess and surcharge collected by the union government, it has increased in the recent past. Now, this cess is a particular kind of or special kind of tax which is levied for a particular cause. Whereas this surcharge, it is collected by the union government and it is a form of tax on tax. And what are the most important aspects of these cess and surcharge? That these cess and surcharge, they are not transferable to the state governments. Hence, the total amount of cess and surcharge, it is deducted from the total tax collection, and this constitutes what is known as tax proceeds. And as per the Finance Commission, 41% of net proceed, it will be transferable to the state governments. However, as far as the recent trends that are available for devolution, hence you can see this has created a vertical imbalance that favors union more than that of Indian states. Further, the second issue which plagues the state finance is that of horizontal imbalance. Now, what is this horizontal imbalance? Because we know all the Indian states, they are not equal in nature. Some states, for example, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, as well as Karnataka, they are more developed and more industrialized in nature. Whereas on the other hand, states such as northeastern states as well as Himalayan states such as Uttarakhand as well as Kashmir or Himachal Pradesh, they are less developed or less industrialized in nature. So you can see that there is a horizontal imbalance as far as Indian states are concerned. Now, many of the northeastern or hilly states, they are dependent on the union government for what are known as grants. As these states, total 30% of these grants or 30% of their entire revenue collection, it is in form of these grants which are given by union government. Whereas also there are several less developed Indian states. For example, there is West Bengal, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, as well as Andhra Pradesh. And total of 20% of their net revenue, it emerges or it comes in form of grants by the union government. Hence, you can see some states in the country they are more dependent on grants by the union government, which makes them imbalanced in nature. Further, this horizontal imbalance it is also increased by what are known as committed expenditures, because there are many states in the country than that of implementing non or new pension scheme. Hence, the states who have implemented this old pension scheme, they have increased committed expenditure. And this committed expenditure, it further disbalances the horizontal balance between each and every state. Further, the collection of revenue by these states, it has also taken a hit in the recent times. For example, as far as collection of tax revenue is concerned, what the states are witnessing is that they are making inaccurate revenue forecast. For also these states have high administration cost, which naturally tends to reduce the amount of total tax collected. Further, as far as non-tax revenue is concerned, we know that state finances they are plagued with issue of discoms. As many electricity distribution companies in Indian states, they are witnessing high debt. And naturally, these states have to undertake the debt of these discoms, thus reducing their non-tax revenues. Further, many states they also operate some public sector enterprises. And if this public sector enterprises are not having good financial health, it will also impinge down on the non-tax revenue of the state. Hence, you can see that both tax as well as non-tax revenue it has reduced in the recent past. Further, states they have also lost some kind of autonomy when it came to increase the indirect taxes in their state, because GST or the rates of GST it cannot be changed by the states alone. Hence, the autonomy that gave the states a considerable autonomy to increase their revenue collection through collection of indirect taxes, it has also reduced through introduction of GST. Hence, you can see that revenue of states they have taken a hit due to reduced tax and non-tax collection as well as reduced autonomy as far as increasing their taxes were concerned. Further, this vertical imbalance is primarily due to increased cess and revenue collection by the union government. Because this increased cess and revenue collection by the union government, it reduces the total amount of tax proceeds which are then made available to the state governments. Further, there is also a horizontal imbalance in the country because some states, as I've already highlighted, are more developed and industrialized in nature, whereas other states, especially northeastern states, hilly states, as well as some underdeveloped states such as Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and West Bengal, they are more dependent on the grants that are provided by the union government. Further, some states such as Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, they have increased their committed expenditure, especially in form of increased revenue outgo as far as pensions are concerned. And this is primarily because these states have decided to move towards old pension scheme and they have revocated the reforms that were undertaken with the new pension scheme. Hence, naturally, RBI using this state finances report, it also suggests some measures for these governments. Now, the first recommendation in order to improve state finances, it came from 15th Finance Commission itself. Now this Finance Commission, it highlighted that both union as well as state government, it should focus on their debt consolidation, which means that the Finance Commission, it wanted both union and state government to comply with provisions of Finance or Fiscal Responsibilities and Budget Management Act, also known as FRBM Act. Further, this Finance Commission, it also highlighted the states to report their liabilities in a more transparent manner, because in order to reduce their fiscal deficit, what the state government resorted was undertake borrowings in form of extra budgetary resources. And these extra budgetary resources, although they are not delineated in the state budgets themselves, but they also provide a certain kind of liabilities on the state government. Hence, the Finance Commission were of the opinion that state government, they should put these liabilities in a more transparent form. Further, the Finance Commission, it also highlighted that states, they need to undertake some kind of reforms as far as collection of their tax revenue are concerned. For example, states, they can undertake reforms in tax administration as well as undertake technological reforms that promoted data analytics. As using these data, the states can try to reduce the amount of tax evasion. Hence, increasing or reforms in administration as well as undertaking technological developments will help states increase their tax revenue. Whereas, on the other hand, as far as non-tax revenue were concerned, the Finance Commission, it was of the opinion that states should undertake monetization of their physical assets. Because according to Finance Commission, states have significant physical aspects or assets such as roads or other infrastructure. Hence, what the states want to do, or the what states should do, is that they should unlock the potential of their existing infrastructure and monetize those assets, as it will provide state with increased finances which can be introduced or can be utilized for other expenditures. Hence, the RBI, it is also of the opinion that states need to reprioritize their expenditures. For example, RBI is of the opinion that states, they need to move away from implementing what is known as old pension scheme, and states should look in order to implement the new pension scheme itself. Because if unchecked, this old pension scheme, it will result into total 0.9% of GDP revenue outgrowth up till the year of 2060. And this is a form of revenue expenditure. While on the other hand, states should reprioritize by undertaking what is known as capital expenditures. Also, states should make effort in order to introduce levels of healthcare as well as educational levels of people of their state. Further, the state should also provide some kind of social security for people of their state. And these healthcare, educational, as well as social security expenditures, they can be a form of productive expenditures. Further, the RBI, it is also highlighted to make central transfers more effective in nature, because currently union government, it provides grant to states in form of revenue deficit grants. Now, lesser is the revenue of a particular state, the more amount of grant it gets. So you can see the states, they do not have incentive to increase their revenue collection by more, because they know if their if they face certain loss in their revenue collection, this will be compensated to them in form of revenue deficit grant by the union government. Hence, this creates a disincentive for states to increase their revenue collection. Hence, RBI is of the opinion that states can make these transfers more effective by undertaking or by prioritizing the states to undertake the revenue or reforms in their revenue collection. Further, these transfers they need to undertake in well defined time, and also these transfers should be made less tied in nature. Further, in the recent past, what we saw that power sector in the country it faced certain challenges because electricity distribution companies, also known as discoms, they face certain revenue strains, and these were compensated by states in form of overtaking their debt. And naturally, when the discoms debt were undertaken or overtaken by the state government, it naturally increased the amount of debt burden on the state. Hence, in order to reduce this debt burden, what the Finance Commission and what the RBI wants to do is that the state should undertake reforms in their private sector or power sector. Hence, by undertaking the recommendations of 15th Finance Commission, by reducing or by making their liabilities more transparent and increasing their tax and non-tax collection, and by reprioritizing their expenditures from revenue to more capital oriented expenditures, by making central transfers more effective and undertaking the power sector reform, we can improve the levels of state finances of the Indian states. Hence, this was all for today's discussion in today's Daily News Simplified. And with this, I ask students to ask their doubts in their comment section below. I'm waiting for your doubts. You can ask your doubts in the comment section. Now, Yuvraj Khatri, he is asking, sir, can you explain committed expenditure part again? Now, Yuvraj, there are certain kind of committed expenditures by the state. For example, if states want to provide more pension to their employees, it means that states they have to provide certain kind of finances just for their pensions. And these pensions they will be given every year to their employees. And this particular instant is it forms the part of committed expenditure, because these kind of expenditures it will be made again and again for every year. Hence, these are examples of committed expenditure. And hence, the RBI wants to reduce the committed expenditures of the state, because if the committed expenditure of any state it increases, it automatically means that the money for other expenditures such as capital expenditure it will reduce. Hamid Ghani, he asks, sir, can you explain this reprioritize expenditure? Now, Hamid, I explained that certain states they are more and more undertaking committed expenditures such as pension payments. Hence, what the state they need to do is undertake reforms by providing healthcare, education as well as other social security benefits for the entire population and not just government employees. Hence, these expenditures they need to be prioritized in more productive sectors. Further, government they also can undertake capital expenditures. Hence, this was the part of reprioritizing the expenditures by the union government or state government. Now, as there are no more questions, now Yuvraj, there are problems that are more political in nature, which are not relevant from our UPSC exams perspective. Now, with this, I'll conclude our today's discussion of Daily News Simplified. We will see you again tomorrow at 6 p.m. Until then, I wish you good night.